Alright everybody, welcome back. In this episode we're going to see if the third time's a charm for these carburetors.
Alright.
Well, I'm on my way, with fingers crossed, to try to register Dorothy. I don't expect to be successful. Quite frankly, I'm trying to, cheat is a strong word. Yeah, I don't know what word to use there. I'm trying to get her registered. I'll leave it at that and see if I can make it happen. So there's because of this COVID stuff, there's car dealerships that are doing registration here in Connecticut, and if it'll work, I'll get license plates. But like I said, I'm not real confident, so we'll see how it goes. Taking some time off of work, so if there's always that. So we'll see. Fingers crossed.
So I was remiss in my last video for not thanking a couple people, Joe, Ron, and Andreas for attempting to help me out with these carburetors. And I'm gonna try it again here. So I'm back at 0. I'm gonna start the car up and warm it up. All the linkages loose and everything like that right now. Go ahead, start the car up, warm it up, let it get the normal operating temperature, shut it down, and follow the same procedures that I have been. Now Andreas sent me a homemade version of what essentially I'm following, and it's a little bit more clean, a little more plain, a little easier to understand. So I'm going to be complimenting what I'm doing here with that stuff. So same old, but we'll see if we can get these things tuned in. All right, she's up and running. Get her up to normal operating temperature and start playing around. As an update, I didn't have any leakage on the brake caliper. I had a very light leakage around where the grass was, so we'll keep an eye on that. 2 small drops of water underneath the pipe or the hose. So we'll see how that goes as the car warms up. This might be short-lived because it was leaking pretty bad before, and I don't want to have coolant going all over the place. Alright, so that's about as warm as it's going to get. So now turn the idle adjustment screws all the way out. And then set for 1.5 turns open. I'm only going to do 1 from the time that this starts to move. Alright, so that's about 1 turn. The reason I'm only going 1 turn is because I know you're jacking the idle up here. So I expect this thing to come on at probably 2,000, maybe even 3,000 RPM. And unfortunately the radiator hose is leaking again. Not too bad though, not enough for me to stop doing what I'm doing. So now that that's adjusted, next up is to loosen the bolts. These 2 bolts here, which is for the 2 bolts for the choke and 2 bolts for the throttle. I've already loosened those because you want the carburetors to operate independently of each other. So that's why you're doing that. And then next up, you want to level the bridges, and I know I've showed you this a bunch of times. I'm not going to go through it again, but essentially I'll take the pistons and the suction chambers off. I'll dial up the mixer adjustment on the jets until the jets are level with the bridge of the carburetor, and then I'll do 2 full turns down. Another thing you want to check there once you get them all the way up is that your pistons fall freely, that little knock, which I'm still good with. So I'll make sure that that's still the case, but again, I'm not going to bore you with this. I know you guys are probably getting sick of me playing with carburetors. Alright, so I've got leveled the jets, checked to see, make sure that my pistons fell freely, and then I turned the jets down 2 full turns, got that all lined up. Now I'm going to start the car, and it's going to rev up, so I'm going to talk now. It's going to rev up pretty good, and then I'll use the unison here, and I'll check to make sure that the suctions are about the same, and adjust. What this pamphlet says is adjust the idling until you can gauge off of the charging light or the ignition light on the speedometer. So for me, I know that the tech manual says, or the workshop manual says, 550 RPM. There ain't no way I'm going to get that. So I'm going to shoot for about 1,000 RPM right now that the charging light is still on in that case, but that's about as good as I'm going to get. So like I said, the engine's going to start here. It's going to come up pretty fast, probably. Hopefully it's not too fast and scare me, but just got to kind of be ready for it. Alright, so that's not too bad. About 2,700 RPM. can adjust this thing on the unison here to tell you, or to adjust how much it's going to suck by. So if you turn it all the way in, it really dampens it down. At this high of an RPM, I want to open it up a little bit. Alright, you can really tell how much that one goes. Alright, so they're getting pretty good here, pretty even. See what my RPM is. Still like 1800. Alright, they're pretty even right there. Still about 1200 RPM. A little bit less. And this car sucks so little air that I gotta crank the unison down almost all the way to get an adequate reading on here. And even then, I can't really tell. Alright, so the unison is as tight as it can get. The idle's just about right where I want it. That's right at about 1000 RPM, but the unison is no good. So I'm going to go grab that fuel line hose, wherever I put that, and see if I can listen. Alright, so what I'm doing here to try to get a baseline is I'm putting the hose right up against the piston so that I'm not too close or too far away from it, so the carburetors are matched. Alright, front one might just be a tad bit more. Not much. Alright, so that sounds right about the same intensity. So now that that's set, and I have the adjustment set, now I'm going to turn the adjustment nuts on our carburetors to weaken or richen the mixture. Up to weaken, so I'm going to screw the jet up into the carburetor to weaken it, or down to richen it, until the fastest idling speed consistent with even running is obtained. Now I've done this enough times that I know that the front carb is really weak, and if I lift that piston just a little bit, I'm going to get the thing to stall. Alright, so I caught it that time, so I know that that piston's really weak. Let's see what the back one does. Alright, the back one seemed to slow down a little bit too. Just a little bit, so not anywhere near as much as the front one. So anyway, first thing you want to do is turn the adjustment nuts until the fastest idle is obtained. So I know that this one is weak, so I'm going to turn it down, and I think the back one's weak just a little bit too, so I'm going to want to look at turning that down. Now you can do this with your finger. I'm going to do one flat at a time. Sorry about that. Do one flat at a time, flip the throttle to kind of reset it, see what happens. Alright, idle sounds like it's coming back still to the same spot. Still coming back. Alright, so I think that's 4 flats. Let me play with the back one here. Try to come up just a little bit. Definitely getting response out of the back one. Now note it says consistent with even running. Right, so I don't want the thing stammered and stuttering. I'm going to go back and listen to the exhaust real quick. Alright, it's not too bad. Throw another flat here on the front one. See if we get any response here. Alright, that front carb still wouldn't stall it out, so that's telling me it still needs to be more rich. Now that time, it went up a little bit and came back down, and that's what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for it to stall, though. I think that might be there on that one. Amazing what one flat does. Yeah, I think I might be there on that one. We'll check the back one. Still slows down immediately, so I want to go another flat from the back. Still too clean. No, I think I might be getting there. Yeah, I think I'm there on that one. So it goes up just a little bit. Drops off. Alright. I think that's pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead, now that that's set, these ones that I loosened up, I'm going to bring them in and tighten them. And you're supposed to be very close to this throttle fork here, and I've explained to you how I really can't get a feeler gauge or anything in there, so I'm going to go ahead, tighten them up as best as I can, and then I'm going to go for a quick ride. Alright, I think I got that licked. I drove it around, it pulled a lot better, no hesitation. It's amazing, just little itty bitty little differences, but that's good to know. It doesn't take much, right? These jets are essentially continually tapered down to a fine point, and I think there's something like 10 or 12 measurements if you look at some of the books that have the jet measurements. So it obviously is infinitely adjustable, but it pulled real well and no problems. Brought it back in and lifted the pistons again and got this essentially the same response. So I know that that's pretty good. So now the next check is to set the choke, and we'll go ahead and try that. This one I haven't even gotten close to, so we'll see what happens here. Alright, so what it tells you to do is tighten these two bolts down here until the jets start to move simultaneously. There's no real adjustment in these holes, so I don't know how that wouldn't happen, so I'm not quite sure. Unlike these where you've got a gap in that throttle fork, there's no gap here. The hole that's in this actuating arm here is almost just as big as the dowel that's in there, so I'm not quite sure if I understand that completely, but the two are tied together and the jets do start to move right at the same time. So now next up is to adjust the throttle cable, or excuse me, the choke cable. It says reconnect the mixture control wire with about 1/16 of an inch free movement before it starts to pull on the jet levers. Not on the jets, but on the jet levers. And then pull the mixture control knob until the linkage is about to move the carburetor jets, and adjust the fast idle screws, comparing the intensity of the air intake hiss to a given engine speed of about 1,000 RPM when hot. What that means is right before, about 1/16 of an inch before this whole contraption moves, is what I want to tighten this cable down to. So the cable can be a little tricky to get in, but it is what it is. Alright, so when you get the cable in there, make sure it's fully seated. Alright, so all I did really was pull the cable tight down. Right, the choke is all the way in right now, and then just push the wire up about 1/16 of an inch, which isn't very much, and then tighten it down. Alright, you don't need to really tighten it too much, I don't think. So now when I pull the choke cable, that'll pull this lever arm up, and because these are essentially connected, because these are tight, that'll pull the choke up, and then it'll pull the choke levers down. So again, pull the mixture control knob until the linkage is just about to move the carburetor jets. And then I'm going to adjust the fast idle jet screws, comparing the intensity of the air intake hiss to a given engine speed of about 1,000 RPM when hot. These screws in the back here that are pointing towards the exhaust manifold, those are the fast idle jets. This arm lever here, and I've showed you this, I can't remember if I edited it out, I've been playing with these things for so long, it's like a cam. So as that rotates like that, that'll come in contact with that fast idle mixture. So essentially what I want to do is pull the choke cable until the actual jets just barely start to move, and then adjust those two screws until really they're kind of just in contact with the cam, and these screws are connected to the butterfly valve. So it's a little bit of a dance here again to get both sides, and these screws aren't real easy to get to, especially the engine hot. I'm sure I'm going to burn the heck out of my hand here hitting the exhaust manifold. So I'm going to get it set up first, and then I'll start the car and actually play with it and try to get it dialed in. Alright, so what I've got this set up now is the choke is locked in and just about to move the jets, and I've got these screws dialed all the way out so they are not in contact with the cam at all. And then what I'll do, start the engine here and then dial those things to get it about 1,000 RPM. So because I'm nearly at 1,000, probably what I'll do is I'm going to screw these in until I just start to get a response, and then call that good. Alright, so that was cool. But now the choke also rebounds. I stalled that on purpose, right? That when the engine's hot, I just essentially am flooding the engine with gasoline there when I do that, so it's not going to run very well. So now that that's set, or at least as set as it's going to make sense to me. So really, I think I'm it. I think I'm done. So I'll put the air filters on here and call these carburetors tuned. Alright, Saturday. The 19th of September, back over to do some more finishing touches. The brake caliper over there on the passenger side is still dry. Even the copper washer is still dry, so that's good. Still got an oil leak somewhere coming from the motor. I got to find that. I've got my my Jam Dynamic slide lock, prop lock on there. So you guys can put a link up and a little click to a video I did on that and explain what the heck that thing is. So I put a lot of gas in the car the last time I was here, and the gas gauge is still not indicating over about a quarter of a tank. I did test the gauge itself using my bench power supply, and that worked just fine. So now that leads me to believe that something's going on with the float back here, which is unfortunate because I put enough gas in it that I don't think that I can take the float out without spilling gas all over the place, so that's not good. So I'm going to try to fish a wire down through the filler neck or something and see if I can actuate the float. My only guess is potentially that the float itself is not floating. That's the only other thing I can think of. I did not test the resistance coming out of the float, unfortunately, but I can do that. We'll see how easy it is for me to get at it. But you can't see where the float attaches from inside the tank, so I'm just assuming that the gasoline that's in there is over the level of the float, so I won't be taking the float out today. So we'll see if I can fish a rod in there and see if I can figure out what's going on. All right, so down in the gas tank, just barely off camera, just to the right there, there's the silver rod that the gas gauge float connects to. I can get a coat hanger in there, I have one, and I can lift the rod up and down to actuate the float. So when I do that, the gas gauge should obviously move up and down. So that'll tell me what's going on here. If I actuate the float but the gas gauge does not move, then I know that something's going on electrically. If the gas gauge does move when I actuate the float up and down, that tells me that something's going on mechanically. Probably the float itself, the little plastic barrel that's in there, probably is not floating anymore. We'll go in, I'll stick the coat hanger in there, I'll put my eyeballs on the gas gauge there and see if I get motion. So I put a little bit more gas in it, and it's still sitting at about 1/8 of a tank. So I stick the little coat hanger in here and grab the rod and lift it up. And you can see that the gas level starts to come up immediately. Let it down, and it comes back down, and it'll eventually settle to about 1/8 of a tank. If I push down on the rod, it does rebound, but not very much. So my guess is electrically it's fine, but the float itself probably has a hole in it. Unfortunately, I've got so much gas in here that I can't, like I mentioned, I can't get the float out without spilling gas all over the place, so I'm not going to do that. And I'll hold off on ordering a new one until I know for a fact that's what it is. So I'll have to run the gas until it's almost gone, get the float out, and then be able to test the float and see if I've got a hole in it or something like that. So definitely a future me problem. I don't know how much those floats are. I would guess under 50 bucks, but we'll see. Under the car here, and a little tight, so camera angles are gonna be pretty bad. But I've got the differential here. Now I do have a leak right here from the front seal. Pretty positive that that's going on, and then a real slight leak from the drain screw. Now I had that, took the back of the case to a machine shop and had them put the drain plug in. The very, very early cars I think had a drain plug in it, and for whatever reason they took those out, so you couldn't drain it anymore easily. There's the fill plug on the side, and I got a clunk back here, and I'm not sure where the clunk is coming from, but I do try to get the camera angle here. Back of the prop shaft here, there's a little bit of slack, and you can't really see it now because I have the emergency brake off, but there's slack, so when the car first starts to go with the wheels locked, it funks a little bit like that. So I'm not sure that that's bad necessarily. If it is, it's inside the differential and not my U-joints or anything like that. All the U-joints are new, as you would suspect, and the prop shaft was taken apart and inspected and all that kind of stuff. So I don't think I got anything weird going on there, but it doesn't seem to be. Yeah, hear that? And you can just barely see the. So I just barely see the differential moving. You can kind of hear it. So I think that's what's going on here. Is that's what I'm hearing. And again, if you guys have any opinions on that, go, yep, you got this problem. You know, I'd love to hear that. But otherwise, I think I'm okay. I don't see anything obviously loose or anything damaged or bent or coming apart. So that's good. And I do have oil leaks up at the front. Unfortunately, I think my rear main seal on my motor is leaking. And that's a scroll seal on the very early motors. And if you remember, this is a Mark I motor and a Mark II car. So I tried my best to center that up. The later cars went to a more conventional seal like we're used to. And you can get a speedy sleeve to cover the end of the crankshaft and then put a regular seal in. And unfortunately, I didn't discover that little tidbit until I was too far gone into the engine restoration. So I may have to revisit that someday. But for now, I'm going to kind of deal with the oil leaks. So little drips here and there, but otherwise, I think I'm okay back here. Again, if you guys know any different, I'd appreciate the help. Drain the radiator. You can see the bucket under there. Took the hose back off. It was dripping just a little bit. So took a wire brush to it, tried to clean the paint up and get the paint off. Also took some sandpaper to it, and I'm hoping that'll do it. I cleaned up the inside of the hose. I was still getting paint off of it, so I'm not sure that the paint makes that much of a difference, but it's flaking off, so it's obviously a surface that's not great there. So I'll go ahead and put this back on, and then next time I get the car started, not today, I'll hopefully we'll see no drips. Jumping all over the place today. I got the radiator hose back on and the radiator refilled, and we'll see how that holds up. The next thing I'm going to do here is this is the soft top, the original soft top. Not the original, but a soft top that I got with the black car. It is a Robin soft top, so it's pretty good quality. I've shown this to you before, and I've tried to clean it up to recover it, and I think I'm going to be able to do that. This here is Zepp stuff, and I'm sure most of you know about this Zepp stuff. I've had good experience with their products. Mold stain and mildew stain remover. It's got a little bit of bleach in it, so I'm going to spray some of this on there. I've got a scouring pad that's kind of just a regular cloth, terry cloth on one end, and a little bit of an abrasive, not very hard. So it's not going to be very aggressive, and I'm not going to try to tear anything up here. But I'm looking for the bleach component to get inside of all of the grain of the vinyl that I wasn't really getting well with when I used the Simple Green. So I'm just going to spray it. It tells you to spray, wait for a minute, and then wipe and rinse. So I'm going to just take this little spot here, spray it like it says, wait for a minute, and then rinse. So I'll give you a close-up here and show you how it goes. That worked pretty good. You're not going to be able to see this at all, so I'm not going to even try to show you, but this area here is brighter white than the area that I did with the simple green. And no, it's not completely out of the crevices and everything like that. It definitely is in there better. So this is going to take a while to do this whole thing, spraying it, let it sit, wiping it, scrubbing it, all that kind of stuff. Notice also what I did there was I scrubbed it and then let it sit for an amount of time again. If I don't edit that out, that's what I did. Yeah, so this should come up. I have confidence that this will come up, but I'm not going to bore you with showing you how I scrub a soft top.
Really close. Let's just say that a supervisor might have gotten in the way, but yeah. So the plan ahead, I think, is to get a temporary registration so that I can physically get the car to them at the dealership there so that they can do a VIN verification, and then it should be registered at that point. So unfortunately, with this COVID stuff, it's about a 3-week time period to be able to make an appointment at the DMV, and that assumes that the stuff at the DMV goes smoothly, which, you know, is always a treat. So 3 weeks out at a minimum. Keep you posted. Thanks.
All right, everybody, thanks so much for watching. Leave a comment below, tell me what you think. Well, I think I got this carburetor thing figured out. Still need to gain some experience on it, but at least it's running better. I'm not worried about the slop that I have in the back of the car with the differential. There may be some lash that can be adjusted there or whatever, but I'm going to look into rebuilding the old one and seeing if I can't fix it that way, if it even needs fixing. Again, your help would be appreciated. That fuel sender, I'll deal with that when I get to that point. Otherwise, sorry about the little tease on the registration thing, but there you go. I'll try again real soon. Thanks again. Have a good rest of your day. Cheers.